Hey everyone, welcome. I want to talk about a client today, a fellow human being who needed help. And I think a lot of you know, and some of you don't. I'm a personal development mentor with training as a life coach and counselor, lots of different theories, modalities. And one of the honors and privileges of being in the field that I am is I get to talk to extraordinary people. I get to hear extraordinary stories. And today, I just want to talk about this one client. And this is a client who struggled with belonging, struggled with lying, cheating, stealing, got themselves into some pretty crazy, chaotic situations in their life. As I listened to this person, I got to know this person. They were really, really difficult to build safety and rapport with. They just couldn't let go, couldn't find the access beneath, couldn't understand what made them do the things that they did. And they were heartbroken. The tears, the emotions that would come through in the explorations. It's interesting because these are some of the areas that in humanity we have low tolerance for, right? Lying, cheating, stealing. All of those things take something away, something precious. Choice, knowledge. There's a whole other story to get into around that. Maybe I'll do a follow-up video around that, but I want to keep this one to this client. And listening to this client speak to the scenarios that they would get themselves into and the reasons that they would get themselves into these scenarios, it's truly heartbreaking and heartwarming all at the same time. A person who wanted to belong so desperately, and on the other side of that, didn't want to hurt anyone, creating this cycle of behavior that always landed in these cheating environments. This person desperately clinging, trying to find belonging, when they're also quite an introverted, quiet person who requires a lot of their own time. And in their life, they ended up swinging from partner to partner to partner, getting trapped in the situation of, I don't want to hurt someone, but I really need to belong. I need to be around this person to belong. I need to perform to belong. I need to do certain things so that people know that they're special. And a lot of those things involve crossing sexual lines, being intimate. I mean, humanity does tend to be a special feeling or a special place for that sexual act in how connected we feel and that we feel special when we get to have that with someone. So for this person, they would always get stuck in these situations. And we're not talking about a mild dose of this. Okay, this is someone who suffers a great deal of pain. This is someone who lived with panic attacks daily, multiple times a day. This is someone who was very unsettled in life, someone who lived with suicidal ideation, who did self-harm. I can remember a story that was about their work, and they were having a really anxious day at work and they didn't know how to get out of it. They couldn't stay at work, but no way could they believe that they could ask for time off or ask to leave just because they were feeling a little unsettled. The lack of safety in the world, the level of rejection in the world to this person was just, there's no way. So they literally found something in the work truck. They were a delivery driver at the time, found something in the work truck to injure themselves, to actually cut themselves. Ended up being a screw that they found or a nail. And they cut themselves so that they could leave work. And I think there are some extreme pieces to this story, but I also think that that is very telling about the levels of fear that we develop and what those levels of fear can contribute to. And at the base of it all, it really is fear. It really is a lack of belief in the self. It's, I'm going to steal because I don't think I can get it any other way. Sometimes we lie for that reason too. This person lied because they didn't want to hurt anyone, which of course is ironic because you end up hurting people in the process. But that doesn't make it any easier for this person to stop. So as I got to know the story, this person, their mother was put on 7 months bed rest while they were being carried. There was a lot of stress in the household. Only one parent was working. The mother's on bed rest. There's another child who had to go away and stay with another family member during the week because of the bed rest. So you can imagine the stress levels. And then when it's time to be born, this person is born very quickly, comes into the world faster than they should have. So they were pulled away from their mother and put in an incubator. That's your first introduction to the world. And then as the story continues, this person was also had a lot of problems with breast milk, rejected breast milk. So missing out on some of that nurturing and connection as well. Had a really hard time. The family had a really hard time finding the right formula, the right milk product for them. Lots of vomiting and barfing as a baby through that time frame. And because of that vomiting and barfing, when they were out at social events, family gatherings, this child was put in a playpen off to the side so nobody had to hold them. And this all developed into a certain insecurity, a certain lack of safety. You know, this child would also develop screaming fits. Unfortunately, the parents were given some advice that they were just attention seeking, that they should be locked in their room until they stopped. And that form of rejection, you know, they say under Erik Erikson, human development studies, that we build trust or mistrust in the first zeros. I think it's 0 to 1 year. Very young, we learn if we can trust, we learn if we're safe, and if we're not, we have to learn survival mechanisms. And those survival mechanisms will inform how we walk through the world. Someone like a Gabor Mate, I've heard reference, and I know Gabor doesn't like to be referenced that way, so wherever it came from originally, the idea that there are two primary needs, autonomy and belonging, but when push comes to shove, belonging is going to win. So you tie all this childhood together with this idea that belonging is going to win, and that person is going to do anything they can to belong, or they're going to do things to sabotage belonging, or both. That's going to inform relationships, the type of relationships, the type of people that this person is going to put around themselves and not put around themselves. It's going to inform the type of confidence that they have. This person lived a life of torment most of their life. Their body started to get ill, started to shine through various kinds of pain. They had lumps all over their body, which would end up being said to be lack of expression. Of course, you're not going to express if that's going to get you locked in a room, pushed away, abandoned. The level of worry, fear of abandonment was so deep. The fear was so deep. Person becomes a people pleaser. Person becomes a chameleon. Person doesn't think anything will ever be offered to them. Through that journey, there was also some physical abuse, some sexual abuse, which created fear in their own family circle as well as outside of it. But on the flip side of that, it also created a person who only knew how to connect through the physical and developed a belief that that was the only way that they wouldn't be rejected out of the world if they were physical. And that translated into men, women, both. Always aiming to be physical because that's the only way that is known to relate. All of this had reason, all of this had backing, and all of this had been recapitulated, meaning that the pattern occurred over and over and over in their life, partially because of their wounds and the behaviors that were driven through their wounds, partially because of who they drew in because of that. This person tried numerous helpers, counselors, psychologists, trying to find help, and couldn't find anyone to listen. Couldn't find anyone that would create a space safe enough to just listen. Everyone wanted to tell them what to do, tell them they were wrong. I remember a story. They were in their doctor's office and their doctor had turned their back to them for a moment. And they finally found the courage to tell someone that they struggled with lying. And this doctor just snaps their head around and gives them the most disgusted, most shocked look. Talk about a way to shut somebody down. The first time they finally can admit that they struggle with lying, and lying is a struggle. It's funny, you can't trust a liar, but a liar lies because they can't trust, because they can't believe, because they don't have self-worth, self-security. They're not okay. And this doctor, trusted professional who managed to be enough that this person could finally announce it, snaps their head around, reacts. So as I sit with this person and as I explore with this person, and all of these things start to come into realization, all of these things start to be normalized, a process of safety and a process of healing begins. Process of being able to hear themselves, to see themselves, and finally finding a psychologist who sat and listened to them. And the irony there is that helpers go through enormous amounts of training. And yet, how this helper got through was to just say, "What would you like to share?" They sat back, they said nothing. And after 10 minutes of sharing, all they acknowledged was that the client held their breath when they spoke. They didn't tell them, they didn't go into how to fix it, they didn't act like they knew them. And this made all the difference in the world. Someone out there genuinely just wanted to hear this person. And as that started to get acknowledged and that relationship started to continue, that person started to see snippets of people in their world or moments with people where people did listen. Where maybe some of the people that they had met in their life had genuine aspects. Still carrying a very, very firm belief that all relationships are about need and expectations, and you must perform. You must perform to belong, and you must perform physically and sexually for someone to feel special. Now, of course, this is a lot of information in detail to share about a client. So I want to acknowledge that I have full permission from this client to share all of this with you. And I know that this seems long-winded, but I think it's really important to realize the impacts of fear and the impacts of creating a space where we just listen and that there's nothing else we have to do other than let that person begin to see that they can tell their story. And as they tell their story, they can begin to find improvement at no matter how slow a pace that becomes possible. The reason I know have permission, the reason I know I have permission to share this story is because it's my story. Client zero, the most challenging client I've ever had to work with, was client zero. And before I did the work, I was a helper, and I would do the same thing. I would try to fix people, and I didn't understand why I was trying to fix people, help them find solutions, help them explore themselves, offering theories, all these magical potions and stuff. And I would later discover, or recently discover, that that was in large part because I hadn't found my way. So I was desperate for someone else to show me it was possible. I've made a lot of messes in my life, and I've made a lot of mess of my life. I now help others find their way through that kind of mess. So much fear, so much thinking that no one could ever accept or believe my story. No one could ever accept, believe that there was a good heart inside of that package of wound, fear, trauma. And really, it took someone to listen in a non reactive way to begin to reach in. I share this, and it's really vulnerable and it's really hard to share. It's been a lump in my throat through the whole story. I share this because there are people out there like me, people out there like you, who have a hard time speaking what's alive, speaking what hurts, have a hard time not pleasing, maybe don't even understand why that exists or why that is. I think it's important that we normalize that life can be hard. Even a decent life can cause fears and wounds that send us down these rabbit holes of being a chameleon, people pleasing, feeling like we need to lie, and being lying is made such a big deal out of that. It has all these subcategories: big lies, small lies, white lies, omissions. It exists because of fear. Would I love to create a world, or see a world created where we didn't have to omit? We didn't have to lie, cheat, or steal. A world beyond all of those things. And I know that seems like a fantasy, but I can assure you, working with clients, being somebody who works with people, I've seen the difference that a safe space can make. I've seen the stories that can find light for the first time, seen the difference that can be made to lives and the lives around those lives. Stepping stones don't even need to be stones. They don't even need to be steps. They just need to be space to breathe. You know, as recently as this week, I was listening to some music, and in that music, there was lyrics. The lyrics came that I could rest now. That's how I heard it. It was just rest now, heal, let the light in. And that still brings me to tears, reminding me of just how much I had to hold in my life, feeling like no one would ever understand, feeling like no one would ever be able to see through it to the genuine, beautiful heart underneath. This is one of the longer videos I've done, but I wanted to share the story. Wanted to share the simplicity beyond the complex, the simplicity that allows the complex to melt away. Every ounce of my heart and soul, I believe this, I've seen this, I've lived this. It's been trying, it's been challenging, it's been a struggle, it's been real. And I am so grateful that all of that has led me to being able to sit across from other people and help them find their way through their journeys. So grateful. As I continue on mine to grow, to explore, to forgive myself, find compassion for myself and the journey that I've had, because it had its reasons. And there is no magic light switches, my friends. None of us can turn on or off the challenges that we have. We can choose to challenge them. We can choose to face them. That still doesn't mean they're going away tomorrow. So can we find it in ourselves to support and create spaces of community, of normalization, of love and care and compassion? That's my challenge to you today. Thank you for listening to my heart and soul. And we'll talk soon.